Welcome to the Growth Whispers podcast, where everything we talk about is related to helping leaders and their teams build enduring great businesses. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined today here, like I am on every episode, with my good friend Brad. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm really good today, really good. Had a fantastic weekend. Got to go out to a public football match, which was something that we haven't done for almost a year. Because of COVID, obviously. So it's great to get out into public again. Eager for a really interesting chat today. How are you doing, Kevin?
I am doing great. I'm just back from a couple of weeks of holidays, although I did a little bit of work in there, but a couple of weeks up at the lake was awesome. And I'm actually going on my first airplane ride tomorrow.
Wow.
I know I haven't been on a plane since March, and normally I travel 2-3 times a month, going to see clients in different parts of the world and North America. And so I've got a client who's like, I really, really, really want you to come. I'm like, okay. So I'm jumping on an airplane tomorrow morning, getting back to an airport. I love airports. So it's gonna be interesting. I got a mask, I got proper, one for the flight there and one for the flight back, and I'm curious, but it's like a novel thing to be getting on an aeroplane these days. So we'll see how that goes.
I mean, I wonder, will the shops be open? Will the lounges be open? I
already got the email just letting me know you got to go through a different door and that the lounge isn't open from what I read in the email that I scanned. So I'm not quite sure why that is. But if you would think it still should be in to space people out. Restaurants are open. Why wouldn't an airport lounge? Anyway, I may have misread the email, and I'm hoping that I did, but whatever. I got work to do. I got to travel, and it'll be interesting. Awesome. So what are we digging into today, Brad?
We're asking an interesting question that may invoke an interesting response from some of our listeners, and that is, are managers useless? And should you consider making yourself useless?
Sounds fascinating. So why don't you just kind of dig into this article that you found about Google and how, in that tech world, lots of people have had the hypothesis that managers were useless. And that they have these strong, independent people that can do great work and maybe don't need managers. So Google put a lot of work into it. So please, why don't you tell us a little about what they found?
So in the early days of Google, there was a lot of leaders and engineers who thought, look, we're building a new revolutionary company. We're going to change the world. And, our experience with managers hasn't been good. We think that managers are overrated and in fact, they're ineffective and they only add another layer of bureaucracy. And what you can, I suppose, think is going on there is they're saying, look, why don't you go away with all your management stuff and I'm just going to get on and do my work. And that, well, we've all dealt with, engineering and computer types who are passionate about what they do. And that's that they see the world through their lens. That's completely correct to them. There's no problem with that. And so they had a fairly strong say. And so Google had a trial where they said, okay, we're going to ban all managers. We'll have no managers. Get in and do your work. And we'll set the OKRs or whatever management tool we're going to use or tracking tool. We'll build the projects. And it wasn't that successful. And so they decided to start this thing called Project Oxygen. And Project Oxygen was designed to say, okay, well, what we've learned through not having managers is in actual fact that managers are important, but let's try to put some data around it. Let's try to understand. So through employee surveys, through analyzing what the best managers in Google are doing and the worst ones, and all across analyzing all of that data, they were able to build this thing called Project Oxygen. And originally, Project Oxygen came up with 8 key areas that the great managers were doing that the let's say less than great managers within Google weren't doing. And the effect also they were noting that was having on their employees. Then they went through, and a couple of years ago, so that was about 2008, and then I think in about 2 years ago, in 2018, they rehashed it and they went over and they kind of went through all of the data again in a much deeper way, and they came up with another 2 behaviors. So now they've got 10 key behaviors that help people to understand effectively what is it that great managers are doing.
It's fascinating. I mean, to almost need to prove the value of a manager in the first place. And I know it's interesting because I've been a part of teams where they don't have formal managers, and it just seemed counterintuitive to me. Now I'm not a techie type engineer, so I have a different mindset about it. So it's great that they proved it. But why don't we dig? And by the way, before we do, in my career, I've worked with some amazing managers that I believe have made a big difference. And when I watch some of the best leaders that I work with, you can see how their people generally outperform all the other people. And it's not just that they're better at hiring. I mean, there is something about these good managers, and you see what happens when they walk in a room and how their people respond well to what's happening. So anyway, it's fascinating. I'm glad they proved it. So why don't we just run through this list of behaviors and we can kind of share some of our own perspectives on it. And I'll start us off with the first one. And I was glad to see this as number 1. Those behaviors of the perfect boss, according to Google, number 1 is that they are a good coach. And it's interesting because, coaching is a term of, you think of the football coach on the side of the field yelling and screaming at everyone. But there's just a different perspective. And what they say here is that rather than solve every problem as soon as it arises, the best managers use problems as teaching moments. So you could use the word coach, you could use teacher, but they're really helping people to learn and grow, almost in many ways like a good parent would.
Yeah. It's interesting that they use that language because the good coach, what we find is that if the person was thinking about the traditional type of manager, you might say a more direct coaching model, a more direct managing model, where a person is getting in and they're telling them what to do, tracking what they're doing, and they're not really as perhaps supportive. Instead, and this is actually something that I work with the teams that I work with, and I know that you do as well, is trying to get managers to understand it's not about telling people what to do, it's about coaching them. So as coaches, we're trying to get people to become coaches of their people. So to ask the questions, to get them to think for themselves, to get the people to actually start taking responsibility and setting the targets and then coaching them along the way to get where they need to go. So yeah, it's really interesting that the first one is coach. And when I think about the teams that I'm working with and the more successful or less successful leaders, they're asking the right questions as they go along. They're really good coaches with their people as well. So I'm definitely, happy that this is number 1.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the best people I've worked, even though sometimes they might seem tough or challenging, that they do seem to want to invest in their people and help them. And again, there's always external coaches, which have a lot of value in certain circumstances, but the managers should be doing that. In the olden days, you didn't need to do that as much, right? There was a lot more yelling and screaming and kind of, autocratic style of management. Well, in collaborative environments with good people, even the coaching approach of sometimes asking more questions and things to extract out of people is really powerful, which kind of takes us into number 2. Empowers a team and does not micromanage. And I love the first sentence in this article. I love to be micromanaged, said no employee ever. And although there are some people who are happy to have someone make all their decisions and de-risk what they're doing, there are people who do that and who are almost comfortable just to take the low road and the easy road in their work. But empowering their team and does not micromanage. So what's your take on that one, Brad?
Well, we want people to have their own sandbox, something that they're responsible for, something that they're proud of. We want people to be proud of their product, to be proud of their company. We want people to be proud of their team. And so I've seen it many times, and I know most people would have, when a person, it's like they put up this gate or this filter when they start to get micromanaged, or when they don't have responsibility for their own sandbox. And what they do is a manager would come in and they would say, all right, well, I want you to do it this way, or whatever it might be, or they would dig in a little bit too much. And it's like it triggers something in the employee's brain where they go, all right, well, you tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it that way.
Or, all right, I guess I don't have to think anymore, nor do I have any responsibility. Apparently it's all yours. I'm going to sit back and be a passenger now.
Yes. And I'll just do my job. And at 5 o'clock, I'll be out of here and I won't think about it anymore.
And that's the root of all good leaders, is they let the pressure stay on the pressure and accountability stay on the shoulders of the person doing the job. They might assist, but they don't take over. And that's a big, now I want to talk about the other end of this though. And I'll take it to parenting. There's parents who believe in empowering their children. And I've had some of those parents visit my home. Sometimes it ain't good. Like sometimes you get the parent that, oh, let's let Johnny's going to find his own way. Johnny will be like beating the table with a steak knife, or stabbing the solid wood table with a steak knife. Oh, Johnny, use your words. Johnny, that's, there's a point of empowering people. You still got to have accountability. And I've seen managers go both ways. Super controlling that don't empower, problem. But when you over empower and don't keep accountability, also a problem. Right. And that's an important part of leadership.
But it sounds like Johnny doesn't have any rules. Like it sounds like, he's when I take my kids out, there's the rules of the restaurant or rules of dining out. And every time we go out, I say, so tell me kids, what's the rules of the restaurant? And because they're young, they're both under 10, 2 of my 4, both under 10. They go, ooh, I know. Don't yell in the restaurant. Okay, that's good. What's another one? So it sounds like for Johnny, there's no established rules. So yes, that's a parenting thing. Well, there's not guidelines, but there's also that philosophy of believing in empowerment and letting kids find their own ways, but not having, by the way, in my house, I have a couple of those kids who I love the kids. When they come to the door, it's like, hey, whose house is this? They go, yours. Who makes the rules? You. I go, perfect. 2 good ones. What happens if I ask you to not do something? We listen to you. Excellent. You're allowed in. This is a friend of mine. I love his kids, but they grew up in this almost hippie gypsy sort of environment of you do as you please. I mean, They would literally climb the walls, like literally. And I'm okay if we're at the playground, but the point of it is that there's empowerment, but then there's still rules and accountability. And some people do take it too far, and those people become horrible managers. Yeah, because they give people not too much rope, not enough. So anyway, I think we've got that one clear. They empower the team, don't micromanage, but but managing still is about following up on details, right? Micromanaging is really telling people what to do and how to do it and everything. But management still has an element of double checking things and control points. But 1 and 2 go in together really well, because I think most managers don't want to be micromanagers. If you actually sat down with a micromanager and said, what don't you like about your team? They would say, oh, I can't trust anyone to do anything. I've got to follow up every tiny little thing. And so I think that they don't like it. But if you can get people to ask questions instead, to coach, I think that those two work in really quite well.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
So let's go to number 3. Creates an inclusive team environment, showing concern for success and well-being. So people have got a psychologically safe environment, or the way that Google put it, in a team with a high psychological safety, teammates feel safe to take risks around their team members. They feel confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish anyone else for admitting a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. So there's a great trust that managers build with
Yes.
people. It's psychologically safe to take risks and to say things, and you're not going to get shut down or pushed out.
And that is a very challenging thing for a lot of leaders to create, because there's a visceral reaction a lot of people have when a mistake is made, and they can't help themselves. And I see it a lot. So some people are wired that way, and some people are really easygoing about that kind of stuff. But that psychologically safe environment is good, because also the other thing, we're chatting about this on the weekend. You know, when you get really driven, competitive people working together, if not managed well and kept as a team, by nature, they go independent. And then many of them will go rogue. It's human nature. They're not bad people. It's just really aggressive personality types. Either they work well together or they want to kill each other. And that really destroys that psychological safety. And that's a big responsibility of managers to be able to do that.
But the manager sets the role for everyone in the team. And one of the things that creates trust is vulnerability. So many times I've had conversations with the people that I work with where I've said to them, look, we've got an issue with trust and you need to be more vulnerable. And then we've worked on some kind of really small things where it's like they feel like they need to have a shield on and stop any sense of vulnerability, because it's a point of attack potentially. But in actual fact, being a bit vulnerable in the right areas as a leader can actually build trust.
As long as you can guarantee a safe environment.
Yes.
Being vulnerable in an unsafe environment is actually idiotic, because you're going to get hurt. So that's why the manager, and even though when we facilitate meetings, I am relentless, although not perfect, but most of my teams the same way, relentless about keeping it as a safe environment. And when people have inappropriate behavior, we stop it right now. And even things like cutting people off when they want to finish their conversation, like managing traffic on a debate is important. Or, you'll get people that have bad behavior or backhanded or sarcastic comments. So creating those rules, and that's one of the things that we often do, and I'm sure you do the same, Brad, is we create rules of, okay, how does this team roll? What are the behaviors that are okay and not okay? Just like your kids in the restaurant, except for it's the big kids in the boardroom. What is okay, and we have them written out in some of our companies. We have it right at the top of the agenda when we're kind of rehabbing a team, which we have to do often because they get squirrely and they end up trying to destroy each other. And those things, this way, teams fall apart without leadership almost always in time. They end up, and you need some of these mechanisms to help them and help them to stay healthy. And some companies aren't healthy, but we try to build healthy companies because they're enduring. So number 4 is productive and results oriented. And this is what I'm glad this is in here. I have seen it so many companies where the leaders themselves, when they're very productive and results oriented, they set the pace and the expectation of others. The opposite is true. When the leader is kind of like, well, let's get to it next month, maybe, if you feel like it. And, if the weather is good and, and we're feeling okay, then you should probably do it. And there's other people like, okay, great. Is that a decision? Cool. When's it happening? No. It needs to be next week. Like, there's leaders who set a cadence and a pace for productivity and results, and they get better results out of people. It's awesome.
Well, they care about the results, and that's what we're saying. It's results oriented. Like, the results matter. There's an old saying that I use all the time, which is people respect what you inspect. So if you care about how tidy your desk is as a leader, everyone's going to end up having a tidy desk. If you care about the results as a leader, everyone's going to end up focusing on the results and what really matters.
And it almost sounds insane that some leaders don't care about results.
But they do.
But they don't. I've seen it in companies. I'm like, what are you doing? This is a business. It's not a show up to work charity. Like, it's a legit business, and they don't. And what's interesting is that you have to create tension if you're results oriented. It's everyone doesn't get a ribbon like, happens in a lot of, preschools and younger schools these days. Like, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And it's not easy for people. Shockingly, in a bunch of the companies that we work with, part of the value we create is going through the teams and the company goals and getting them to score themselves in front of their peers and holding them to it.
Yeah.
And not letting them off the hook. And it's shocking. It's shocking how it's uncomfortable for some people to do that. Now, often it's because, one of the senior people hasn't done so well themselves. So then they don't want other people to be held accountable, because then that means they'll be held accountable. And that's why it helps as an outsider. But it's not a given. And I believe the most successful CEOs I've worked with, this is one of the ones that sticks out at the top. They care about results. They themselves deliver results. And if you don't deliver, it's kind of tense for you. You feel very awkward if you don't produce in those environments.
And as you said, it's kind of the purpose to a degree. It's not the core purpose, but it's, we're here to create results. Everyone has a bad day now and again, but consistency matters. Consistency. And so, focusing on those results rather than, just turning up to work and just moving through the motions. The employees say, remember, and this is important, that employees say that the best managers are results oriented.
Yes. Now, and the other thing you got to unpack out of this is that, we want the opinions of the high performing people, the ones that we'd like to hire 10 of, and not everybody. And sometimes those managers they're not bad people, but they probably either shouldn't be a manager because it's not the way they're wired, or maybe themselves, they're not that motivated for whatever reason. So it's a big one. And it's surprising how often we see people aren't results oriented, especially in larger companies where you can hide. You can hide with a lot of BS and PowerPoint presentations in some of these organizations. And when we go and drive into creating quarterly goals, that's why I am relentless, sometimes bordering on ruthless, about getting clear, measurable outcomes on every goal. Not activities, not I'm going to do this work. I don't care about the work you choose to do. I want to see what it produces. And if it doesn't produce, let's learn. But
absolutely,
that's hard.
When we get to the end of 13 weeks, one quarter, when we get to the end of 13 weeks, how will we know if we've crossed the finish line? Or when we're 6 weeks in or 8 weeks in, how will we know that we're likely to achieve it? So you're saying to your peers at a weekly meeting, I'm definitely going to achieve that. Well, where's your evidence? How are you making that assumption?
Exactly.
Because if there's no measurability at the end, how can you possibly say that?
Yes.
But yeah. So let's move on. Is a good communicator listens and shares information. So the best leaders, the best managers listen. They aren't a one-way speaker. They listen, they understand, and they show appropriate empathy in the situation. So it's a bit of love in the previous, or in this one, and a little bit of discipline in the one before around results. So it's a good combination there. And so, listening and understanding the situation means that let's go back to the beginning when Google said, we don't think that we need managers. We're above that. We can work better on our own rather than wasting all of our time with managers. Well, maybe that's because there was no listening, no empathy for the situation before. They have their own completely correct perspective for them. And if managers had a different take, it might not have been suitable.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think in this generally, it's any intelligent human being probably is good at this one, and many of these, where you've got to listen and understand a situation first before you go and share information or have an opinion. And now, it's not saying they're going to listen to your story for 45 minutes. When they listen, it might be 47 seconds, but they are going to listen to understand. And it's shocking. There are some people who have horrible listening skills. And I'll never forget, I heard about a study. This was something I read 25 years ago, and about a person who did a research study, and they would take flights in business class from New York to Los Angeles and back. And their challenge was to only ask questions of the person beside them, not to share anything, not to talk. And then they would interview the person that they sat beside as they exited the plane. And the people would rave about the conversation and how they just absolutely loved the person they were talking to, who told them nothing. Just ask questions. So there's a psychological piece about listening and asking questions that makes people feel good, never mind what you learn. And as a manager, you learn so much by asking questions, but it also builds good rapport and a great relationship too.
About 10 years ago, I did a program with the Entrepreneurs organization at MIT in Boston. And one of the speakers came up, and I was running my own business, and thought I was a pretty good listener at that point. And I say, I thought I was a pretty good listener. And so we had this exercise where we went into, I think it was groups of 3, and one person had to talk about a subject, and the listener wasn't to know the subject, but they were given some information, and then we as the listener couldn't write anything down. All we could do was listen, and I think it was for 5 minutes, and then we had to repeat as much as we could back at the end of the allotted 5 minutes. And that was a wonderfully humbling experience, let me tell you. And I learned so much from that, because what so many people do when they're talking, they're phrasing in their head, what is going to be my response or my question, or how am I going to add value to that, rather than just sitting and listening and then pause and then compose my thought and then respond. So if there's a pause after your statement, if there's a pause after you have been told something and you're listening, that's the time you want to own that pause and then ask. Because if you're not absorbing information. It was so good.
I was taught, so I worked for an amazing manager who did all of these things. His name was Warren Morgan. He was a mentor. He almost was a father figure for me. He was an outstanding man. He sadly passed away before his 50th birthday, which was a horrible travesty, like a shockingly amazing human. And I remember Warren introduced me to something. He gave me these audio cassettes. This is back in the 90s. And there was a guy by the name of Lou Tice, who had, coaching type programs, really valuable information. And Lou taught a lot. So he got me listening to Lou Tice early on. But one of the things that Lou Tice taught was called lock on, lock out. And I've never forgotten it. When you're having a conversation with you, and when you say something that the person wants to respond to, you can see the words shaped on their lips of the response they're going to say. They are no longer listening. When you stop, and it's fun, you do it. If you're talking for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they'll go and blurt out what they're saying, which was 2 or 3 minutes ago. Like, the conversation's moved on, but they're going to comment on something 2 or 3 minutes ago, and they didn't listen for the entire 2 or 3 minutes because their mouth was fired up, ready to fire as soon as you took a breath. And so it's called lock on, lock out, which means you lock on to something someone says, and then you lock out. So I've learned a lot of techniques on that one myself. And one is to let it go. Just let it go, because listening in our work is very important. 2 is a pen and paper and make a note. So if I write down a key word in front of me, my brain relaxes. It trusts that if that's important, I'll come back to it. and then I stay in the active conversation, not the historical Then what I do is I'll put up my finger like this, or I'll stick a finger out, and it's a great prompt to say, and for whatever reason, it works for me. So again, so I can stay in the conversation, not locked on, locked out. Lots of things, and so many people do that. So many people, and they don't even know it. And it's, as a manager, the more you can be fully present and hear people, one, the better you can help, and psychologically, it feels better for the person too.
So on a very quick side note, geez, I don't know if I'm locking in or locking out to what you just said. On a very quick side note, just between you and I, I'm very, very lucky in one part of my life. I've got a fantastic wife. Couldn't ask for better. I feel lucky every single day. And one of the ways that I managed to get such a great wife is, I remember on our first date, remember it's just you and I, on our first date, I'd kind of cottoned on to this concept about asking questions, and you understand it. And so, met my wife at the time, my wife now, you know, we didn't know each other then. And we went out to a restaurant pub kind of place for a few hours. And we got to the end of the night, and she said, "You know everything about me, and I don't know anything at all about you." And that's just listening and asking questions and listening and asking questions. And it just worked, because if you are the person who is being asked questions, this person thinks that person is, you know, they're really interesting, or they're really interested in me. Like, this has been a great conversation because it's been all about me.
Honoring, amazing thing that goes back to the flight. So one more, I got to throw one more in here.
I've just got to close this out, but then because
sure,
this is,
go ahead.
this is the twisting of the knife, right? My brother, who shall remain nameless, well, he's my brother. He met his wife, and 3 months after they'd been dating, she said to him, "Look, I know everything about you, but you know nothing at all about me." The opposite. So I often tell that story. Tell that story.
So back in 2015, New York Times published an article, and it was called "The 36 Questions That Lead to Love." And it was a study that they did. And they found that almost any two strangers, now this could get dangerous, almost any two people could fall in love if someone goes through and they discuss these 36 questions in order, because it creates emotional bonding. So
I love that.
We're not going to demonstrate this together. We don't need to do that. But it's fascinating. And so it's a series of 36 questions, and it's found that it creates this openness and this vulnerability, and then it leads to a connection.
Yeah, it's a bit like hacking the serotonin that makes people fall in love.
It's exactly what it is through psychological. So anyways, so this is not about falling in love, although it is about having a strong, intimate relationship in the professional version of it with your team. Asking questions and listening is a key thing. By the way, asking questions is one of the most powerful leadership skills there is. So let's move on to number 6.
Yeah.
And it's again something that often happens when managers get busy doing other stuff, but it supports career development and discuss performance. So they're really understanding what people want to achieve and what they want to have happen in their future, and sharing feedback about what they got to do to get there. So basically, as one of my clients says, it's about having their back, knowing what the person wants and helping them to achieve whatever it is they want in their life, ideally, and work. Because I was talking with a CEO a couple of days ago, and he goes, "I really want to help my people achieve more of their goals." And I said, "Okay, why? What you're thinking?" He goes, "Well, look, everyone's got motivations and things they want to do in life. And because of those things they do in life, that makes them want to excel in their careers to fund it. In a lot of cases, to to have the performance, to get the compensation to do the things they want to do. And he said, I want to make sure that we both have clear goals for work and life, which kind of fits into my book, Your Oxygen Mask First, sorry. Because that's just, it's, I want to know what they want and I want to help them to get it. And he goes, and that's the greatest thing I can do for them in their life. And it also really works well for the business too.
Yeah. So discusses performance is the last part of this number 6. There's a HBR, Harvard Business Review article, and it's entitled, Your Employees Want the Negative Feedback That You Hate to Give. Okay. And it's about a research study by Zenger Folkman. And in this study, they surveyed people, and the problem that they identified is that managers, leaders, they don't want to give negative feedback, but negative in the context of constructive criticism.
Yes,
but
things that aren't good.
Yeah, but it's what employees want on a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, so what that means is if I said to you, would you like me to give you some positive feedback? You're going to say, well, yes, to let's say a factor of 2. But then if I said, would you like to get some constructive feedback? The survey data said it was double that. It was twice as many positive respondents are wanting to get this constructive or negative feedback. And managers hate to give it. They will do anything to avoid saying, look, Kevin, this is what you do well.
Can we just say ineffective managers hate to give it?
Yes, we can.
Right? Because you know what? The effective managers are generally fairly good at letting people know when things aren't okay, in my experience, from what I have seen. But a lot of humans hate to give it because it's tension and people want to be positive and they want to be your friend.
But it's not what benefits the business or the team or the individual.
I am like, if you want to see me get mad, have an underperforming person who hasn't been told that they're underperforming. And I have learned, I ask to see documentation. Like if someone's going to lose their job because they're an underperformer, which happens fairly often in the companies we work with because we hold the bar high and we want to perform seriously. But I often ask to see the documentation. What was the feedback that was given? What were the goals that were set? What investment did we make to help them improve? And they usually can't show it to me. And this is the part of HR and HR departments I think is insanely valuable, is making sure people are given the tough feedback. That's why we normally do quarterly talent reviews with people. So we go through, as managers, we discuss where people are at and what they got to do to get up to the next notch. And then their job is to go tell the damn people.
Yeah. But
not telling people how or where they're letting you down. To me, I get angry, Brad. It just drives me nuts. Because when you tell people,
unfair.
It is. It's unfair. Especially, and if you're going to be the type of person who's going to go and release someone from their employment without giving them a chance to step up. Now, if they step up, I had one guy, I worked with him for probably 7 years in another country. Executive, he was a really good guy, and he had some issues. We worked on the behavioral issues, but then he still couldn't produce and deliver to his manager's expectations. Now, I couldn't tell if his manager was just trying to get rid of him because he was a bit difficult, or if he didn't produce. And classic case of this. So I said to the manager, we're going to have a meeting, because the CEO said, Kevin, I need you to make sure this is good. This is a new manager is trying to get rid of a long-time guy. I don't know if it's a power thing, a political thing, or a performance thing. So we didn't know. And I didn't know. And so I said to the manager, look, we're going to have a meeting and here's what we're doing. Because if you're going to consider letting this guy go, it's a big deal. So I had the manager, please lay out the expectations for him that he has to meet to keep his job. It was crap. What he laid out was blah, 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 fluff, fluff, fluff. It was like, I'm like, no, this is not. What are the specific, tangible things he needs to produce?
Yeah.
So we sat down, the three of us, and had the conversation. We agreed on 6 things the guy had to produce in the quarter. The boss agreed. The other guy agreed. It's kind of like we all, shook hands and agreed. This is what's required for you to
Yep.
keep your job. Came back in 90 days, and he didn't do it. And so I could sit there again with the three of them and say, how would you rate yourself on each of these 6 things? We did the math. It came out to 52%. I look at the manager and I said, how would you rate it? He said the same. I looked at the other guy and said, you realize you probably aren't going to keep your job. He said, yes. I said, you were giving a chance. I said, I believe in you, and you were given a chance.
Yeah.
You, for whatever reason, didn't deliver. And he goes, yep, I understand. So now we're clean. We're really clean. Now it's still not nice, but he was given a chance to deliver what he needed to deliver, and he chose not to, because a bunch of the things were within his control. So now it's a fair bargain. You've given the person, some people might do it for another quarter, but at that point, they I think the week after they parted ways. And so that's what but this manager was not being a good manager. He had a feeling, but he still wasn't giving him a real appropriate chance.
And that's, I think that's the minimum that people should be, entitled to, is just a fair chance. It is
the minimum, Brad. I mean, it's only fair.
Yeah.
Like, I love people and care about people and believe in people, but in this work, I have had to learn to be loyal to performance, because the companies we work with are up to serious stuff. And so if you're going to be having high standards, and if people don't meet them, they lose their employment, which is a fairly big deal. It's got to be done right. Otherwise, you're just not. Now, if we give people clear expectations and we give people the right support and they don't do it, well, then it's something else is wrong. But we have to isolate the variable of the manager, and that the manager, and often the variable of the manager is not well managed. It's part of a notable part of the issue.
Yeah. We don't know what percentage of people will turn around, because it's circumstantial. It's about the manager in the circumstance, the employee in the circumstance. But once you've done that, like you said, we're clean. We're good.
Yes.
And you've done the most. But there's a legacy that's carried as well that people often forget, and that is all of the people around who know what's going on, all of the other employees and the other managers. If you do the right thing, if you give the person a chance and you're clear and you've set metrics, you can walk away with your head high as a leader.
Yes. And you touched on something, Brad, a little lock on, lock out here. You never know who's going to step up. Yeah. I have learned that I don't know. All I know is we got to give them a chance. I've got one woman in a company that I work with in another country. I thought there's no way she's going to step up. Through a combination of a 360 feedback, so we got her statistical feedback and some very robust comments on how she can improve, and feedback with her manager, she's like doubled her performance. She's one of those ones I figured she'll be out of the company in 90 to 180 days. She is doing excellent. Like, I would have bet from my instincts, I would have bet against her. She didn't seem to have it yet. She did. And I've seen others who you think that they would, and they don't. So this is why this key thing of managers supporting development and giving the feedback on performance and how they can improve is so damn important. So let's go on to the next one. And this one is, again, these are all so darn logical, but they get missed. And they have a clear vision or strategy for the team. And it sounds, are they a visionary, or is it just something that they create something for the team to psychologically be connected to and hold on to?
Well, this comes from Google, and Google is a huge organization, and each team has their own strategy, effectively, is what they're saying, or vision. So it's not about, we may think about a mid-market company, let's say 100 employees, where a CEO has a vision. This is more broader. This is about individual team silos. And so they've got a vision for that team. Let's say, use the pizza rule. There's 8 people or whatever it is in a team.
Yep.
So they say, this is who we are and this is where we're going and this is how we get there. And importantly, this is the part that you play in that. And I'm going to come back to a word I said, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, pride. So when we know that we're a part of something bigger as a team, we are able to feel pride in that. And great managers can use that vision to invoke the pride of people and the accomplishment that the team achieves together, and knowing, well, we're this far in and this is where we're going. And you could really do that in any particular type of team.
Yeah, and because you know what you're a part of, right? It gives you something bigger than yourself to be connected to. And we like it. It's almost like when I drive through the mountains and you stand or drive by the foot of these massive things. It's humbling and awe-inspiring. And the same thing is true about being part of something amazing in a company. But again, a lot of leaders just let people to think about the work and don't paint the picture of why we're doing this and where we're going. And it's so simple, but it's much more rewarding. And in many ways, it's like being on a road trip and driving around and having no idea of where you're going or why. It gives you a purpose, and it's again, simple, but it's a critical thing that really impacts humans and psychologically makes a difference. So let's go to number 8.
Number 8, ahead. Yeah, has key technical skills to help advise the team. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because the very beginning of the Project Oxygen, what they said that key technical skills are not everything. There are actually many things. So it's still an important, let's say, foundation. Like the person needs to be able to technically understand the team. And I guess if you're an employee and you go to your manager with a technical problem, you want to get, if not the problem solved, certainly some valuable discussion, coaching, debate around that. And the person might not even need to be as equally technically competent as you, but they've got to be able to have that debate. So there's got to be some kind of decent technical skills where they can help the team.
Right. And that's why when people join a new company, if they don't spend the time to learn the business, they're not going to be respected or valuable. And it was interesting. I was up at the lake that was at for a couple of weeks, and there's a bunch of guys there that are, a combination of entrepreneurs or very successful executives, like very successful executives. And as we sit and chat, what they know about their industry and their business is inspiring. And you notice a lot of people will be sitting up there on their decks when we're having some chill time, and most of them are reading. They're reading, learning, understanding. And I've seen that with a lot of the people I work with. They really want to be knowledgeable so they can be valuable. Mm-hmm. But if you don't spend the time to learn and be up to sync, and I remember one executive that joined a company, we're a year in, and he still didn't understand the damn business. Well, I'm sorry, you're useless in the wrong way. Because yes, you have manager skills and discussion skills, but you got to understand the subject and the context of what's going on. And it takes a serious, serious investment to be able to do that. And so otherwise you can provide generic thoughts, but you're not smart enough to have an intelligent discussion with your team.
In my book, I put numbers around this, and it was from another source, but for a CEO, 80% of the leader's time is about personality and culture skills, and 20% is technical. You go down to an executive or a manager, and then it switches to 70-30, and then you go down to a supervisor, and it's 30-70. So 30% personality, 70% technical, and then you go to a frontline worker, and it's 80-20. So it switches from the top to the bottom. But yeah, it still has to be there, like the technical skills, the competence, to your point, the subject matter. You've got to know what is the game that we're playing so that you can add value. So let's move on to number 9.
Yeah. And by the way, on number, and that's why when people join a new company, the best onboarding systems have them working often for a week in every department, because they actually have been there and done that, and they just didn't learn it from the report or the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So when you've been on the floor doing sales or in the back doing stock, it keeps you connected with the business. You have a way better understanding than just a hypothetical understanding.
Which kind of leads us to the next one about collaborating effectively.
Yes.
And so what Google identified is that the bad managers see the other teams perhaps in a competitive light, or they see them as potentially not in a way that they see them as positively contributing to this team. The great leaders, what they were doing is seeing the big picture. They saw that all of those other teams can actually contribute to our success and can contribute to our ability to achieve the vision that they've set for the team.
And it ties back to the best leaders. Their first team is the team that they are on themselves, not the team they manage, which creates for a harmonious. So if it's an executive team, those executives are harmonious and work well together. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence or capability to fight with your fellow executives and make your own team your primary team. And it's like, we're great and they're bad. But then you create so much dysfunction and more hassle for your team between them and their collaborators or the people in the other departments. But the ones who get along very, very well with their peers make it easier for their teams to work with the other teams. But it's not normal. It's very, very easy to get pissed off and go rogue.
And yeah, I use that exactly the same philosophy or that same application myself. So you've got a sales manager, let's say, who's on the leadership team, and I would say to them, who's your number one team? Okay, is it the all of the salespeople that you manage and spend 98% of your time with, or is it the people in this room? And 99 times out of 100, the person will say, oh, well, clearly it's the sales team and I'm here because you've told me to come. And the most important thing to me is the sales team. That's where I spend all of my time. And we try to inverse that and say to them that the leadership team has to be your number one team for a whole range of reasons. But we need to get the leadership team dynamic as the most trusted dynamic, and that you will not be here fighting for your team, but you will be here in the best interest of the whole business.
Yep, the greater good. And man, does it show. I was with one company and there was a bunch of drama between the different executives. And you could hear it you could tell who was on what team by the way they spoke and what they said in the meeting. Yeah. And there was one executive, and this executive's people, it's like you almost wanted to give them a bit of a shake because they all had a similar bad attitude that wasn't appropriate to the greater good of the team. And you wonder where that came from.
Yeah.
So let's go to the final one. Last but not least is a strong decision maker. Now, this one can be a slippery slope in some cases, but we'll come to that. But they actually make smart decisions. They're not emotionally reacting to decisions. They gather the information, involve their teams, and make good decisions. Now, you can always debate decisions and say whether they're good or not, but this is more about having a good process that they follow and not just, shooting from the hip on a lot of decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point you just made then, I have a saying that I say to managers: don't sacrifice your former self. So at the time, provided that we've got that robust decision-making process or context, you know what? Like, we made the best decision that we could and we have to live with it. Let's not sacrifice our former self. And that means that it gives you license today to make faster decisions. We're going to make the best decision that we can, but there's a saying in the army, and that is that any decision is better than no decision. And even if we're running towards the fire, at least we know what we're doing and we're not just standing there waiting for someone to make a decision.
Yeah. And it's hard. There's a fine balance between, by the way, how many decisions should the leader make? A lot of leaders try and push decisions down as much as possible. Otherwise, it's almost decision making is a form of micromanagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say that they have a healthy amount of the decisions. In my book, I've got a chapter called Stop Being Chief Problem Solver, and where the ultimate leaders get their teams to make 90% of their decisions on their own, almost all. So, you know that you're probably not optimized as a leader if you're still making a lot of decisions, because psychologically it feels great to make decisions.
Yeah.
But it is a trap. It's a form of control and micromanagement, and you stifle your people if you make too many. But for the good ones, people need to be involved. And sometimes you've got to, what I call the question. So I had a woman, and I'm sure she's still around. Her name was Judy Majewski. She's she's actually my second client ever in my career. My first client was her son, who had his own business. So he referred me to his parents. But I remember Judy and I were debating about something. It was like a logo or something in terms of marketing. And she goes, Kevin, we're just going to have to agree to disagree and then move ahead. And I was like, I wasn't having it. I'm like, this is not right. No. She's like, Kevin, we're going to agree to disagree. And finally I got it. And I can be a little bit argumentative, and she understood. But the point of it is that sometimes you just got to make a decision. And even if everyone doesn't agree, we'll go around in meetings and saying, look, can you agree to support the decision? So they're not agreeing to the decision. They're just agreeing to support the decision. People raise their hand. Okay, boom, let's go.
Yeah.
Because some leaders try and get consensus.
It's never going to happen.
On important stuff, generally not. Now, there's a balance between hearing people out enough and calling the question, but there's a lot around decision making, and the root of it is getting enough of the right information, which goes back up to listening earlier on, and truly understanding and not assuming that you know. This is just an awesome list, and the basic. We know what it takes to be a good manager for those of us that study the art or the science of leadership. But seeing this in a study by people who almost had a bias to the fact that managers weren't needed was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, that's number 10. Yeah, a great list. Again, it's called Google Project Oxygen. If you search that, you will find it. It's a fascinating study, and it puts some really good quantitative numbers and direction from employee feedback around what makes a great manager from, again, an organization that thought we should get rid of managers altogether. So yeah, an awesome chat today. Thanks, Kevin. It's been great today. Good to get into this. So as we move to close, so this has been the Growth Whisperers today. It's been great to have you with us. My name's Brad Giles, and I'm joined with my co-host here, Kevin Lawrence. For Kevin's company, you can find him at lawrenceandco.com. And for myself, it's evolutionpartners.com.au. So you can find the video version of this on YouTube. And in the meantime, it's been great to have you. We look forward to chatting again in 1 week. Have yourself a great week.
All the best.